Good afternoon, and thank you and welcome to the panel. I'd like to just delve a little bit into who the panel people are. We have Marianne Kekana, who is the Chief Digital and Analytics Officer with ConnectMe F&B, and she plays a critical role in leveraging data and analytics to drive strategic decisions that support business strategy and enhance customer experiences. Thank you for coming, Marianne. And then we have Lungile. Lungile Binza is a seasoned ICT professional with over 20 years of experience, serving as an ICT executive for the past 8 years, currently the Group Executive of Technology at SABC, and he's also the founding director of digital consulting companies for Age Consulting and CIO Lab. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
And then Govender. May boasts 22 years of IT industry experience spanning many industries, and she's passionate about empowering women in ICT, and she's earned a number of accolades and also serves as a keynote speaker. Welcome. And then Tato. Tato is an experienced head of IT, focusing on creating memorable customer experiences using technology. Her passion for tech and customer experience started many years ago, and now she has the privilege of making them a reality. Welcome, Tato.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's delve straight into the topic, generative AI, right? I think it's become such a hype, Gen AI, and oftentimes I hear people talk about let's implement Gen AI, but people don't always understand what use cases and what value that can bring to their organizations. So I'll start with Marianne. How and where have you, how and where can you drive value to business using Gen AI?
Thanks, Esther, and good afternoon to everybody. I think driving Gen AI is closely tied to the business strategy as well. So in the space that I find myself in, which is ConnectMe, it's more of how we connect with the customer. So the business use cases are usually closely linked to customer experience. And having to decide which business use case you're going for, it's all about what will be the best in terms of return. Because what we're looking for from a customer experience perspective is what is the experience that you want your customers to actually experience when they're using your capabilities. And using Gen AI becomes one of those things, because if you're having an interaction, is how do you start looking at things like bots that you can integrate into your entire value chain from a communication perspective so that you can get the experience that you're looking for. So there's different use cases, especially if you're looking at it from a customer perspective in terms of what you want to generate. But also it's from an organization perspective, what is the strategy, and like always we're looking for customer experience to be improved, and that's where you find a nice business use case in order for you to actually start drilling through in terms of how you draw value from it.
Okay. Lungile, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Was it McKinsey and Company recently who spoke about generative AI contributing just over 2.6 or between 2.6 trillion as well as $4.4 trillion onto the global economy? I think it was just in 2023 alone. It's just the way it's transforming everything that we've come to know about business. I mean, it's tightly integrated into any business strategy today. I mean, for us in broadcasting, for instance, I mean, we've got what is called augmented reality and virtual reality, which is also part of, Gen AI. You basically can do literally anything. You can go on to a commercial break, and someone else watching you, assuming that it's a human being that is talking to you, but actually it's not, and therefore it's just something that has just tightly and slowly integrated itself onto the way we do business today. It's not even a digital strategy that's sitting alone. It's actually a strategy that is tightly integrated onto the business strategy to leverage and generate value. I remember when I was in banking, and you said earlier I I'm a seasoned ICT executive. I mean, we would even be talking about this as something that doesn't go on leave. It works 24/7. You're just sitting there and it's making money on your behalf. It's just, you know, the amount of power that it brings onto any business.
Thanks, Lungile. May.
Thank you, Esther, and hi to the audience. From an Old Mutual perspective and from an insurance, I think one of the biggest things that we have sort of seen is that AI is obviously the hype right now. It's trying to take a step back and say, what are the big use cases, like Marianne said, that's really going to drive transformation? And what we have seen is that taking a more strategic approach in the way we go about it is quite critical. So there's lots of sort of use cases that's out there, something that we're playing around with, and that's what a lot of organizations are doing, is actually playing around with it, doing POCs. Some have got pilots out there as well. Is that one of the big things we looked at is that, especially being an insurance organization, there's so much data and complexities and risks that we need to take into consideration when we actually put out a policy. So AI, we're using as a mechanism to try and sift through all these data and help us make decisions, specifically from an underwriting perspective. What we've also seen is from a customer is help taking the data that we do have and provide insights that can help us give sort of nudges to our advisors and to our service consultants, so at the point of interaction, they've got much more data in front of them to be able to respond. Being a technologist as well, I've seen that the developers have actually just really have adopted it. They love playing around with it, but we need to also think about what does this mean for us. So what they've done is they're looking at all these sort of mundane tasks that they usually do. They're using AI to try and help them. I mean, one of my sort of IT executives sends me a report where he just puts it into the AI and sends me a report on a regular basis. I don't know whether he's doing it or the sort of ChatGPT is doing it. So I think the context around the business value, there is so much of opportunities. It's just that we need to find a very clear way on how we articulate it and how do we find those true business cases that's going, or business use cases that's really going to give us the value.
Okay. Tato, how are you doing this at Teleshow?
Yeah, so if I can share just a couple of opportunities or use cases that are very pertinent in our space. The first thing being the front-facing, right? So you sort of split it into what do you do from a front-facing or customer-facing perspective, what do you do from a back-office perspective, because the benefits look a little bit different and the risks are very different also. So when you look at it from a front-facing perspective, being in the insurance industry, they said we're sitting on a lot of data. What can you do to hyper-personalize experiences? What can you do to give customers sort of those rich human-like experiences and elevate those experiences to drive loyalty to your brand? You also can have opportunities within marketing spaces, content that you can create. Previously, you would need a brain to start from scratch. Now you can actually get a huge head start in generating your content and then have a human sense check it and vet it afterwards or tweak it according to whatever nuances that they need. And also in back office, simple cases like pulling in context from a customer and generating an email response, and all the human needs to do is complete, right? Start to see all these opportunities to augment what we do and enrich what we do so that we can get to the things that matter. But again, it's about how we tap into these use cases and also do it responsibly, but also make sure that you have the correct guardrails to tap into this opportunity. I mean, I think we saw how quickly ChatGPT grew in terms of utilization. So if we look at our customers and we're paying attention to our customers, I mean, there were about 100 million, they reached 100 million users in about 2 months. It was mad. So the customers are already telling us something that if we don't bake this in as part of our strategy, we're going to be left behind.
Okay, agreed. And what do you think is the best approach? Is having a systematic and strategic approach the best way to be able to leverage the use of Gen AI?
It has to be. It has to be. So the way that I see it is, it has to be part of the strategy. So you can't talk about AI, about digital transformation without talking about agility, right? So your strategy governs, and then within your strategy, you determine your value streams, and from your value streams, you determine your customer journeys. Because if your organization is not structured according to customer journey and customer experience, then the customer is an afterthought, right? So you have your strategy, you have your value streams, you have your customer journey, and the AI opportunities will present themselves in the customer journey. And that's how you build and incorporate AI for success in a systematic way, baking it into the strategy.
Okay. And May, do you agree?
Oh, yes, I do. I think, not to repeat what Tasha said, very similar experience. I think what we found is that when AI first has come out, and what we've seen is a lot of the business lines have got very excited around what this means. So what they did is, being a very big organization, is everyone went around to try and play with AI. What does this mean for me? Using their own use cases, etc. And what I started seeing afterwards is that if you don't have a systematic and strategic way in how you deal AI, what's going to happen is it's going to be free for all. Then I'm going to have like 6 different platforms that I'm going to have to worry about, investments in wrong sort of aspects around use cases, and it's just going to be a bit of all over the place. So the challenge that we sort of face from a mutual perspective is trying to find the balance between ensuring there's agility in allowing for use cases where the work is being done to be looked at, but at the same time build a strategic way in the way we go about thinking about it. So really looking at putting a strategy together for AI, number one, is what is our AI strategy? What is the framework that we need to use based on this? And very clear on, do we need to build an AI COE within the organization if we're really serious about it? And what does that mean from an organization? So it's do we centralize it? Do we sort of federate it? So those are kind of the aspects that you need to consider, because at some point in time, it is going to get very big. And being in a big organization, you need to put some kind of governance capabilities together to also take into consideration the ethical considerations that you need to bear. But also, we're a very regulated environment. We have to think about the compliance and the regulatory components. So bringing all of that together and bringing a framework in a strategic sort of systematic way will allow for us to be able to allow for the agility, but working in a framework and working within sort of guardrails itself. And that is what's, I think that's the sort of aspect that we're sort of driving.
Okay, and you've talked about in terms of the operating model, right? And you've said you could potentially look at whether you federate it or centralize it or even create a hybrid model. But how does it impact the organizational structures, whether positive or negative?
Good question. So there's actually two folds to it. So let me talk about the positive aspect around it. So what we're finding from an operating model perspective is that once you sort of create the COE, because that's what it is, it's an AI COE that will give best practices about how we think about it, we need to be able to actually get AI embedded in everything that we do. We want to be led by AI. That's our ambition as an organization, an AI-insured organization. So that means we need to embed it. That would also require us to start getting the people that are in the ground to think about how they use AI. So one of the positive around it, and I think I spoke to this when I was talking about the business value, is removing that mundane task that we need to have to look at. So one of the things the developers are looking at is, how do I get code better? How do I actually look at using AI to automate our sort of test scripts, etc. And then I talked about the fact of AI being used from a knowledge perspective. So it's those interactive aspect that can actually happen now versus doing those videos, etc. Those sort of legacy way of doing training. We can think about training differently. So there's definitely positives from a workforce perspective on how we sort of think about it and look at AI to actually transform your workforce. I think some of the complexities or challenge, I won't say negative, that we're going to have to experience is that because AI is so new to the industry and new into the world, I think one of the big things we're going to have complexities around is the skill sets. Because what's going to happen is that we do not have enough AI sort of expertise in South Africa, and it can be used as an opportunity to build capabilities, so it can actually be both, which is why I said it can't be a negative. But at the same time, if a lot of us, and as Esther, a lot of the organizations that's in here must be doing some great stuff as well on AI, we're all going to compete for the same resources, which means we're going to inflate salaries once again, like how we did from a cloud perspective when engineers first came out. It's a similar sort of concept, unless we come together and think about how do we do the upskilling in the sort of country itself and try to build the capability. Because what we would have is then we're going to have a skills gap, because all of us are going to start trying to focus. So the challenge we've got is getting the pipeline that's required from an AI capability as the sort of engineers grow from school going into campus, and what does that mean? And then at the same time, upskill our current developers to start thinking about it, especially if we want to embed AI in everything that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to rethink the type of skills that we probably need now that we have this Gen AI, you could call it integration, you could call it like hype, but definitely, I mean, there's even now a role that is trendy now called the Chief AI Officer.
Oh, yes.
So Marianne, what are your thoughts on that as well?
I think it's also a lot of change management, right, from the user's perspective as well. Because we can speak about code assist as an example. Within a code assist environment, you're basically saying a person that used to write code, they need to let go because something else is going to be able to do it for them. And it's how do you make sure that they understand that we're not saying that you're being replaced, but you're learning how it actually enhances your entire journey in terms of how you do it, right? How I also find it fascinating is that different teams also have gotten to it in terms of PMO are also using it to, like they're using generative AI for documentation to predict timelines using historical data to know that how projects are going to be working. But it's intentional from their side because they understand that the world is actually moving and they need to move with it. And what I also realized is that, to your point, we don't have necessarily a full set of skills that is readily available. We need to be open to partner with those that have so that we can actually transfer skills internally in order for that learning to continue internally as well. But I do 100% agree with you, in terms of having to bed down the policies that are within our space, the change management becomes important, because if we don't change at the speed that this thing is going, we're going to be left behind, because we keep on saying that people are going to be replaced by these things. Well, I still say that who's going to code it, but anyway, I think the point is that the world is moving. There's also a change management perspective that we need to look at in order for us. It's a journey at the end of the day, and it's how do we actually also take our people on a journey, rather than just saying it's a technology thing and they just need to hop onto it. If we're seeing a bit of resistance, it's how do we take them on this journey so that they can actually adopt the technologies that we're putting in place, and making it very clear in terms of what are the benefits for them.
Okay. And Tata, I mean, you talked about, how you have to look at it even from a front end, back end, all the different angles. How is it impacting your organizational structures?
Yeah, so the way that I see the impact on organizational structures is, it depends on the appetite or the strategy of the business, right? So you might have some more leading companies who will say, we want to lead on this, we want to be at the cutting edge. And so transformation for them would probably mean that the business model changes. So the companies that are really serious about digital transformation know that it means the business model changes and the structures change, right? And companies like that will restructure according to AI and how that looks. And typically, you could reuse your digital business model and inject AI in there because it actually is the same outcome really that you're looking for. But then you have other organizations that have a more incremental approach with regards to how they do that. But really the benefit of transforming your organization or your business model according to this means that you become extremely nimble to tap into this technology. The moment you're serious about innovation and you create room for innovation and experimentation, because let's face it, AI, it's still at early stages, right? It still needs supervision. It still needs someone to say, I'm happy with what just spit out. So there's a lot of experimentation that needs to happen to make sure even within an organization, we're able to adopt whatever is pertinent, whatever is safe to tap into. So I think that there's positive change in that way because we're able to be more agile, we're able to react quicker, and we're able to adopt the technologies. Even if, GPT-4 is a new thing and the capability that can unleash, and which was a big difference from GPT-2 days, right? But in the next 2 years, it advances again. And at that point, you mustn't be in the back of the curve. You must already be structured to be ready for it. So it's really structuring yourself for the future, which is a positive thing for an organization that is really, really want to be forward and in the leading edge of this. The negatives, perhaps from a transformation, I'd say it would be fear of losing jobs, like what Marianne said, that people are scared they're going to lose jobs. I think we shouldn't be scared we're going to lose jobs, but our threat is actually people who can use AI. The people that build the skills, those are the threat to the people who actually are not picking it up. So really the fear should be, I need to get skilled as soon as possible, and we need to figure out how we skill organizations at the organizational level actually on how to tap into this technology. And the reality in the back office is that there's a stat that about 68% of workforce uses AI without it being approved. They find a way to use it somehow to do something. So it shows that the employees are interested in using it. So we just need to formalize the information, formalize the education, and skill our people to know how to actually work with this, because it's going to be part of life.
Okay. And, change is not new. I mean, Lungile, you've 22 years experience in ICT. You've probably seen a lot of change and evolution when it comes to technology. And, organizations are currently, when it comes to Gen AI, at different levels of maturity. What are you seeing as the impacts that are currently happening? And what do you see will be the potential impacts going forward?
Look, I think obviously the target operating models will change. What we are picking up is that even outside the job destruction or job substitution, and possibly the job creation on the other side, which is the positive, there is in the middle what is called job polarization that is, happening, where the AI comes in and it basically does everything we know of, from a back office perspective. But the AI still can't make the decision. Yeah. It can tell you as the executive or the board of an organization that this is the right decision you must make, but it's still you who will still make that decision at the end. So there still has to be an individual that makes that decision. As well as, it's similar at the bottom. The guys that are cleaning, even though you can have a bot that will do all of the cleaning and sweeping and everything, but then to open up a curtain and then wipe and then do all sorts of other things that a physical person would be doing, you find that AI is still not there yet. It is obviously coming. But from a structuring perspective, the target operating model is definitely being impacted. You now need to say, okay, so my middle part of my business, I can just deploy AI and most of that can be done. But then at the end, there still has to be people that are there that are manning this thing. What we're picking up as well is that the actual building and the development of these AIs, it's actually benefiting a lot. I mean, data scientists, data analysts, NLP builders, all of, those are, and then the skills that May was talking to earlier becomes, a very contested space where everybody now is saying, where do I get these skills? And you find that it's the same place where we go to for these skills. But then it's the mundane, routine type tasks that, an AI, would do. For instance, if you were phoning, 3 people every hour, this thing can do, a million people in an hour. And therefore, at that stage, you're like, oh, shucks, look at the benefit on this side. And it's kind of free outside the capital expenditure that I've used to implement it. But then now, all of a sudden, there's very little OPEX that is there, but I'm paying a lot of salaries on this side. It becomes that ethical question that we're talking about. But the benefits are extremely, extremely high. It's just going to benefit us all. By the way, on the substitution question, we've seen, AI has been around since the 1930s. People have been talking about this for quite a while. And was it John Maynard Keynes who said, let us be careful of, this technological unemployment that's coming. But all of us are still employed. And we're still, there's still going to be more that are coming onto the workforce. So it's been around. The only difference right now, maybe it's just one thing I can say as a last thing, is that this one is actually continuing to learn. It's continuing to get better through machine learning. And therefore, it might just, get even better than all the other technological revolutions we've seen in the past. But still, for me, there's still going to be humans, whether from a building side or from an enhancement and monitoring, side of things. So, yeah, we just have to, as far as I'm concerned, just to guard against it taking over everything that, it shouldn't, maybe in an unethical manner. Outside that, as a technologist, I just enjoy seeing this thing, working.
Okay, and I suppose, just on the back of what you're saying around the ethical considerations, concerns, and the risks, there's an industry debate around what comes first. Is it governance or the use case? Some organizations are taking the route of first put in the AI policy, then we look for the use case. And some organizations are either doing it in parallel or they start off with the use case and then they think about the governance later. But given the point around, there's aspects of job security issues and even just security issues, cybersecurity is a big concern. And also just around the AI models having certain biases, because at the end of the day, AI is trying to replicate, the human element of thinking, right? And as human beings, innately, we are biased. There's even a certain situation that happened in Detroit, the Detroit police in the US, where they had the facial recognition solution. And it was, it was recognizing people that were not criminals as criminals because of just the innate biases around that was inbuilt into the algorithms. So that being said, Lungile, what are the ethical considerations and risks associated with Gen AI and what should we do about it?
Sure, there's plenty. And it's one of the things that I'm actually even more passionate about compared to, to AI itself. And I remember, I think was it Bill Gates recently who was saying it's actually posing an existential threat to us. I think Elon Musk said we like summoning the demon or something along those lines. And Sam Altman from OpenAI, which built ChatGPT, was saying, we need to, start thinking about effective regulations around this. But as a technologist first, I want the technology. And therefore, I would always implement the technology with a business strategy that would make me to compete and be better in my customer experience. But then comes, the question of ethics as well as the regulations. The big thing, there's so many, AI for people that are out there. There's the Hiroshima AI process now that has been introduced. There is so many, countries, especially the G7, as well as other developed economies that have, AI, ethical AI frameworks. In South Africa, we don't have it yet. I mean, we don't have a legislation or even the regulatory and policy framework yet. I know it's being developed by the department responsible, but it's still not there. But I think the key principles on all of this is about the benefit. Is this AI benefiting everybody? In an organization, then you would think about the employee, you would think about the employer, and then you would think about the customer. Are those three people benefiting out of this? And then it talks about fairness and justice. That's another principle that it's there from an ethical perspective. The question is, in South Africa, if you're having a natural language processing, for instance, in a bank, can it pronounce Lungile properly? The technology currently is obviously being developed elsewhere, and rightly so. But then, as part of the training and machine learning, it starts to understand the local language, the local accent, the local pronunciation, and everything that goes with it. So you do want that aspect as well to be embedded in this, so that people, when they call you as a bank or even as an insurance company, they start to say, oh, okay, now the person who's speaking on the other side sounds like me. And therefore, you start, I need to think about that as well. And then there's so many other principles around transparency. Can you explain this? Who monitors this? Does the organization know when this thing fails? Where does it fail? Was it a Microsoft one recently that was giving the F word and everything to people? So it's all those types of ethical considerations that have to be there. And I mean, in my thinking and in some of the work that I'm doing on the side is to try and say, can we get what we call a balanced AI? Have all the business benefits and the opportunities that are there, which I'm very passionate about. But then on the other side, do you ensure that your AI is actually ethically behaving? And I think it's a big question that I think it's not yet answered. I mean, trustworthy AI, sustainable AI, and AI for people, all the other AI frameworks, they are talking about just this thing being ethical. But on my side, I'm thinking about this thing being balanced. Everything else, being satisfied is always going to be a very, very fine line to do that.
And your point around inclusivity, it's important that we include almost all different types of people thinking into the discussions. I know that there's a forum that happened, I believe, in the EU, where they invited world experts to come in and discuss how we could regulate AI and discuss the ethical aspects. But there wasn't anybody from Africa.
Yep.
Right? So that is a big concern. And Marianne, what are your thoughts on the ethical considerations?
I think diversity becomes an important thing, especially as we're building out these models. Because firstly, highly regulated environments, if we're going to have models and we're not able to actually explain how we came to the output, it becomes quite difficult. However, having different people that are diverse in terms of the building itself, and never mind, it's more from the dev side, having diversity at that level, making sure that the risk elements are also being assessed from a model perspective, it becomes quite important just so that we've got diversity at that level. But I think the one thing that we still need to answer is, as soon as a model does take out a result, I like what Lungile said, is you still have a choice to actually say you're taking it or not. But as soon as a result does come out, how are you going to explain, if it is questioned, how are you then going to be able to actually explain how that outcome came about? And it becomes important that we make sure that we're removing the biases of making sure that when it picks up at a certain race and then it does something else, it becomes quite important that we've got diversity at that level.
Okay. May, your thoughts?
Couple. I mean, I sometimes talk about AI hallucination, in the sense that it gives you a specific sort of response, but not necessarily knowing whether that it is right, okay? So I think it's that validation step thereafter that it's still required. I don't think we can ultimately just trust everything that's coming out. And that for me, I keep talking about the data component around it. Everyone jumps to the AI component, but if we don't get our data strategy, our data quality component sorted out and really understand our data properly, you're going to have a very different view around how the AI is going to work. I'm not going to talk about the airline that had that issue, but I mean, that's a very good example of how we could go very wrong. But I also think, I mean, like, biasness as well, in the way like Marianne was talking about, and the way we train the models, how we train it, who trains it, what data are we putting inside is also very critical around that. So having a way to think about it while we learn and making sure that we still consider that it's not perfect. We need to have another step that actually looks at the ethical considerations. And it needs to be organizational one, which is why I talked about the systematic and strategic aspect associated with it, because we can't not think about it, because the reputation around just going out to market or representing it from a customer perspective, if it does go wrong, is too huge. So having that sort of filtering mechanism right now is what is needed in order to get it to a point where I think it is sort of can be trusted.
Okay. And Tata, are there any other risks you think we should be considering and managing?
Yeah, so I want to focus mostly on the data. I think the quality of the data is absolutely critical, like May said. If you look at a lot of the risks, it's based on the quality of the data, right? So some other risks are personal information risks, where you've now pulled someone's personal information accidentally so into your model and it's learning more, yet it's not authorized to do so. Things like IP, patented images or content that your model has now pulled in, and now you're learning on IP that belongs to another organization, belongs to another company, the biases as well. So right now, we know that we don't have our local sort of data sets dedicated to the continent or dedicated to the country. We're relying on the European data, relying on the data from the US, and that's scraping all of their biases, that's scraping all of their background data. So I think a key thing for us as Africans is there a way to create data sets for Africa, data sets and contexts for South Africa, and then once we know that we have that, it's easy then, it becomes easier, let me not say easy, to then have our own local regulations, because SA really, this is not regulated yet in SA. The data is still not local to us and local to our South African context. So organizations then, to manage these risks, are probably going to have to keep within their domains, keep within the data sets that they're actually allowed to have access to, and build on that, as opposed to sort of exposing yourself to the wide internet, where you can untap so much of opportunity, but the risk is also almost equally high.
Agreed. Before we go to questions from the audience, maybe you could be thinking about some questions for the panel. Any final remarks? I think we'll start with Lungile.
Yeah, no, look, it's, as I said, on my side, it's the balancing act. And in that balancing act, which one would you give a higher weighting? Is it the business benefits? And if you're in business, you should. Or is it the ethical considerations, which, if you have this, social orientation, you would have. But from an AI perspective, it just continues to learn. In broadcasting, for instance, we've got what we call OTTs, over-the-top platforms, like your Netflixes, your Showmaxes, your SABC Pluses. In there, when you go in there, there's obviously AI that's working behind the scenes. It sees you, your patterns, everything you do when you're watching your television or whatever videos you're watching. Immediately when you come in, it immediately just collects everything that has to do with you. It knows your profile. It will recommend. So it's what is called the recommendation engine that's sitting behind. And then it will tell you, yesterday you watched this, do you want to watch this one, which is more or less similar to that. In that, it's a question of whether, though, do you want it to learn that much about you? Is it learning in a way that is governed? Because, with POPIA in South Africa, you can go so far, and GDPR in Europe and North America, it's also, still, in those jurisdictions. But from my personal perspective is we need to enjoy AI. It is here to stay. It's a question of how do we ensure that it behaves in a way we would like it to. And the Global South, which includes South Africa, should actually start thinking about how do we put together things that talk to us as the Global South people, because we're not represented in most of these forums that are sitting in either in Europe or in North America. And we can actually, come up with things that are even more better and more unique in handling the utilization of AI.
Okay. Marianne?
I think from my side also, it's just embracing the journey. And some might be slow, others might be quicker. Appreciate where you are in terms of the journey that you are at as an organization. And I think I would also advocate, partner with the people that have done it. I think I can't stress that enough. If you're not yet matured enough, partner with those that are matured enough in order for you to advance the journey. But all we can do at this point, like Lungile said, is we can embrace the journey for what it is. The ethical, the security stuff will always be heightened on our side just because of the environments that we are in. However, I say if you want to advance, I like the question that we had earlier this week, to say that as data professions, how much data do we actually use in our leadership role, right? And with Gen AI, you can actually ask yourself the same question in your day-to-day, how much of Gen AI, and that could just be your starting point in terms of trying to embrace this technology, is are you already using it? Even if it's ChatGPT, is it already doing presentations for you? So it starts with the small steps, is just embrace it with what you have. It's going to be very easy to take it at a large scale and do it in your businesses as well.
Agreed. To your point, Marianne, I was at a CFO forum, and a question was asked is, we want to use AI. And I asked the question, do you know what AI is? It's like, no, but I want to use AI. Everybody's talking about it. So it's important to also take a personal interest and learn how to use it. So I agree with that. May?
I think it's here to stay. So if you think it's going to be a tomorrow problem, I think it's too late. You need to think about it today. And you need to figure out what does it mean for you from a people perspective. So have a plan. You need to think what does it mean from a process perspective, and what does it mean from a technology. I also believe that you need to probably be in the forefront of trying to figure out how you're going to maneuver through this, because I think, as Marianne said, nobody's got it right. Everyone is still figuring this out. We've partnered with an organization. I've seen some organizations that's getting it very right. Ping An being one of them. It's a Chinese insured organization, and they're really doing it remarkable stuff. That's in the forefront of customers and really leapfrogging from a digital perspective. That's something that we could also consider. It's the aspect is just being very careful around what you can and cannot do, but also at the same time just making sure that you understand strategically what this means for you. How do you create awareness? What does the board think about this? How do you create trust in the organization, specifically from a people perspective? What does it mean for them? How do they embrace it and adopt it rather than being scared about it? So there's so much of aspects that we need to consider. All my sort of thought process around this is it keeps me up at night to figure out how do I take this entire organization in this journey and making sure it's in the right sort of right way.
Awesome. Tatu?
So I think that if you don't do this, somebody's going to eat your breakfast in the next couple of years. So we have to embrace this in organizations. We have to embrace it as employees in our capacity, in our own capacities, and embrace it responsibly, right? But you also don't want the responsibility to stifle innovation. So you want to really, really take full advantage of this, because most of the benefits we're probably going to reap in the next couple of years. And so what we do now, how we start now, the frameworks we put in place now for it, the structures we put in place now for it, we're actually going to reap proper rewards in the coming years. It's kind of like when Steve Jobs and his team built the iPod, they built a device that no one ever asked for, right? And so the space that we're in with AI, we're probably going to innovate and create products and experiences that no one's ever asked for. But once we get to what those things are, they're going to not be able to live without them, kind of like iPods and smartphones today. So really, I think that a lot of visionaries are going to come out of this movement or out of this revolution that's coming. And everyone must really grab this with both hands, not just from a Gen AI perspective, from predictive AI, all sorts, all the pockets that we can get to tap into the power of this technology.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, so one at the back and one at the front.
Good morning, or is it afternoon already? First of all, I just want to take on honor the fact that in a conversation about generative AI, you have a panel fully made of mostly women, so I think that's quite impressive in itself. But to my question, I think the conversation around AI, especially when you go to some of these summits and conferences, the conversation is usually associated with people talking around from an organization, especially big organizations. But in a country where the economy has a lot of small, medium enterprises and people don't usually have the knowledge or the expertise to kind of tap into AI, what are those what kind of conversations does one have to think about then, considering that there's a cost element where it comes into elements of talking about data. If you're a young woman who has a business in the middle of Limpopo or KZN, and you obviously create a level of competitive gap where a big organization can invest a lot in data and AI, whereas if you're a small insurance broker somewhere and you don't have the opportunities to invest in this kind of technology come into play, how does one have to think about that? So that's basically my question.
Who would like to take that?
Is it me? It's a very tough question. But thanks for the question, and I'm sure the team will come in as well. But I think when I was in banking, what we did was we created what we call the persona of a contact center agent. And we said that persona is a 27-year-old black woman. And then you started to say, in South Africa, what do we say about a 27-year-old black woman with matric? We know there's high unemployment in that range. There's even those that have degrees and they are even, I'm going to call it post-matric qualification, they are still struggling. Would you then implement AI because of the business benefits instead of saying, you know what, I'm actually creating something better here by having this person employed, and we know the dependency ratio in South Africa is 1:6. Every one person that's working, there's about 6 or so people that they are, supporting. And therefore you start to say, oh no, it's not just only the one person that's here. There's a lot more that I'm actually impacting by doing this. What do I do? Then you think about cross-skilling and all of, the other things that you do in order to make the person, become more relevant. So it's quite also not very far from then a small, medium enterprise that is still starting out there, and it's competing with this big giant maybe, that has all the support from a capital, perspective, whether it's through money or technology or something like that. How do we then make that person continue to be relevant? Because even though employment is not necessarily something they start thinking about as an entrepreneur, but at the end it becomes an outcome. Because as an entrepreneur, you think about all of these good little things, and then you say, oh, shucks, who's going to help me, do all of these things? And then you find that now you are attracting a lot more people to your business. So it is something that you have to always look into the context of your environment. In our case here, you can't be reckless in implementing AI.
I think if I may add, because you're speaking about a small, in terms of the context that you've highlighted, right? I think what also becomes important is Gen AI it's actually sitting on data as well, right? I think it becomes important that it's sitting on data. If you've got a small business that is sitting there and they don't have data, I think what becomes important is, from an exposure perspective, is how do we make sure that they know how to structure their data in such a way that we can put all of these things on top of it. The reality is, if we're going to talk about Gen AI from a business context and we don't have the data allocated or being collected in some way or form, it's going to be very difficult. And I like some organizations are partnering with small businesses so that they can structure how they can put their data into some sort of way that they can start analyzing it in order for these Gen AI or tools can start being more, they can start using them. And I think as well as a small enterprise, if you do have the data, I always say that walk the journey that you are meant to be walking, you know, as there's information that also exists. We're going to be growing into this area. But I think with your question, what becomes quite difficult is if you don't have the data, to overlay these tools becomes quite difficult for them as well.
Maybe I can add as well. I think, but a slightly different perspective around it, is that I look at it as an opportunity for the small and medium enterprises that didn't have the access to data previously to now have the ability to do so. In the sense that ChatGPT, I'll use it as an example, is now being given as an SME. You can go in and get access to a whole lot of information and use it. You may just have to validate whether what you're getting is right, but you have an access to it. Same thing that a developer in a big corporate is using, a developer in a small tech company can also do the same thing. So I almost find it is that as though it's closing a gap in a way, that, and if the small and medium enterprises can use this more as an opportunity more than anything else, you can get that gap closed quite very quickly. I also would like to take another lens around it to say that I think as big corporates, we need to play a bigger role in education and awareness, etc. And lots of sort of work can be done. I mean, we're working with an organization that's helping us build a pipeline for AI skills, not just from a normal university perspective, but going into areas where you wouldn't normally take skill sets from and learn. And that, I always say that you're getting that person that's part of a community and a family, and you get the skill sets there. That person is actually building the skill sets within the family, and that family is building skill sets within the community. So you're starting some way or form in trying to build the capability.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want to add, if I may,
Sure, yeah.
that taking Marianne's point and Ray's point about, is your business a data business? If it's not a data business, then some of the use cases will not be applicable to your business. But then there's also other Gen AI techs that are available. The stuff is open source a lot of the time, so it's actually accessible. But it's the education that it's accessible that's probably going to be a bit of a barrier. Something as easy as, I'm a small SME, I'm not a data business, I ask Gen AI to create me a website. That's how quickly it is, in fact. So, but people don't know that they have access to this being in the small enterprise sector. So I think the first thing is, are you a data business? If you're a data business, your approach is very different versus do you just want to tap into the technology and get a lot of the automation that you would typically need to hire a developer for, a content creator for, and those sort of things. Education is key for this one.
Thank you. And unfortunately, we have run out of time. Question, please. I think the panelists will be open for you to approach them later. But so thank you so much. Thank you for this. Thank you.
Thank you.